Stage 15 of the 2015 Giro d'Italia, and this is a mountaintop finish up to Madonna di Campiglio, and Astana are driving the pace on the front with Tanel Kangert, the Estonian rider, really strong. Mikel Landa second wheel, Alberto Contador in the Maglia Rosa third wheel, then Fabio Aru in the white young riders jersey, also on the Astana team. Fourth wheel, Leopold Koenig for Sky, Yuri Trofimov behind him for Katusha, Andre Amador, the Movistar rider, second last, and Stefan Kruijswijk last. And they have 5.5 kilometres left up this climb, and Leopold Koenig is not particularly happy with how things are going, with Kangert absolutely drilling it on the front. If you followed this race at the time and followed the Cycling Tips articles from the Secret Pro, he said that this was one of the toughest Grand Tour races he'd ever done, and that was because Astana had an absolutely loaded team. I know this slope says 3.5% right now, and that's why Kangert is driving the pace, but it really, once they go through the village in about 2 kilometres or 1 kilometre, it really pitches up to 12%, and that's where the GC attacks are going to happen. But yeah, every stage just about finished 15-20 minutes early than the projected finish time from the race organisers, because Astana were drilling it. They had Kangert, Landa, Aru, Paolo Tirolongo, Hrivkov, I think one of the Russians, and Michele Scarponi. So a dominant team full of experienced European riders. And they had a bit of a GC dispute a la Froome and Wiggins between Landa, the up-and-coming rider who'd not won too much previously, and Fabio Aru, who was the anointed Italian rider. So the Italian media, the Gazzetto, every day was saying, oh, Astana must ride for Aru, but to me it was clear that Mikel Landa in general was stronger than Aru, and without the strength of the Astana team, Fabio Aru probably wouldn't have placed or got on the podium at the end of this Giro. The day before this stage, there was an individual time trial, and Contador had blitzed the GC rivals. Landa had lost, I think, 4 minutes. So that goes to show over longer time trials the difference weaker time trialing can make for some of the climbing specialists, and that's going to be Landa's Achilles heel, just like some of the Colombian climbing specialists. Because as you might have heard, Mikel Landa is going to Bahrain Merida. He's leaving Movistar. So Vincenzo Nibali is going to Trek Segafredo. So Landa will finally be freed. The Free Landa campaign has worked, and he'll go to Bahrain Merida. Quintana's going to AKS Samsic, and Enric Mas will apparently be the Movistar general classification rider, but after his performance in this year's Tour de France, you'd have to really worry about his credentials. And Andre Amador, who's second from last in front of Kruijswijk, you may have seen him working really well with Marc Soler in this year's Tour de France. He was a really strong domestique, setting up some of the Landa Quintana moves. He and Soler covered themselves in glory, maybe not the Movistar strategy. And I think this stage is really going to highlight what happens when teams are inflexible with changing their strategy on the fly or having a plan B for general classification. If you just predetermine that, as Astana did, that Fabio Aru is going to be our general classification rider and Mikel Landa should do nothing, despite being stronger than Aru on many stages, should do nothing to jeopardise that. Especially as Landa was 25 at this time, and he's trying to make a name for himself as well. And if you're feeling really good, there could be nothing more frustrating in the world when you're attacking the Maglia Rosa and you feel like you could put time into him or cement second place on GC, to then have to wait for a teammate who's really not climbing as well as you. Although Fabio Aru eventually found his legs on one of the last stages and won the stage to Bruges Civigna, where coincidentally the Lanterne Rouge had done a course recce in the previous year at the end of 2014 just to test out the altitude and make sure that my biopassport was looking real sus to water. And yes, I was scared that storm was going to end my life. But back to this race, 3Ks left and they're coming up to the 12% pinch, and Landa attacks, and the camera decides that they're going to show some mountain shots while the pivotal moment in the stage is happening. And Landa is effectively, he's dropped Aru right now. Contador says, thank you, I'll have a lead out up this climb, and sits on Landa's wheel. Landa looks back and goes, oh, you gotta be kidding me, this Egypt can't stick on my wheel. And then, see, Landa has taken his foot off the gas, and Contador's like, Aru's in trouble, I'll counter over the top. It set it perfectly up for Contador, and Contador's strategy and tactics at the pointy end of the Giro and all the stages were just fantastic. He just kept Fabio Aru in the bin at all times. I mean, it's not, Fabio Aru seems to sort of live in the hurt box, but now Landa, I guess, had an excuse to sit on Contador and mark him. But no matter how good Landa was feeling in the legs, his DS has basically told him you can't attack Contador and you can't work with him because Aru's our GC man. So if Landa started working with Contador right now or attacked over the top of him, I've no doubt they would have put significant time into Aru. And Mikel Landa, this was his best result in his career so far. He's never won a stage race. He's won a stage in the Giro, I think a stage in the Vuelta. He's never won a stage in the Tour de France. Because I was looking at his palmarès and I was like, if you ask me who were the top 5 climbers over the last 5 years, like pure climbers in Grand Tours, I would have said Mikel Landa, but his palmarès don't really represent that, and that's why there sort of has been this joking campaign on Twitter to free Mikel Landa, because he seems to just be held back all the time. Like he wants to attack right now, but Fabio Aru's barely on the wheel. I mean, if Aru was half decent, he'd be able to attack. Well, I mean, half decent. He's clearly like a top rider, but ideally he would attack over the top of Contador right now instead of Landa just has to sit up and wait. And Landa comes third on GC at the end of the Giro 2015. Contador wins by, I think, a minute and 53 to Fabio Aru, but he sort of had a bad day at the end. And Landa lost by a minute and 7 to Aru. And there's no way you can't tell me that Landa could have got closer to Contador. As Fabio Aru attacks, terrible idea. I mean, as I said a minute ago, if he was feeling good, he should attack. That would be the good tactical move. But he's clearly not feeling great and clearly not on the level of Contador. And I think sometimes riders need to think with their head and think, okay, if I'm not actually feeling on top of the world, if I'm not confident that I can gap this guy, who, by the way, is like talking and chatting right now and seems to be covering every move as Landa tracks the motorbike up about a 12% pinch and drops Aru off the wheel again. And Contador follows, so he's basically just binning his own teammate again just after Aru caught up. So Aru attacked, and now he's extra tired as he has to close this gap. And Yuri Trofimov, I'd never heard of him before this race. He's the Katusha rider who somehow manages to stick with this group and with Aru. But back to Landa's palmarès. His career has been really unfortunate in that when he seems to have had the best legs, he's not been the preferred GC guy for his team. Movistar this year in the Tour de France, I mean, he wasn't winning that Tour de France, but he wasn't their GC guy. When he was on Team Sky before Movistar, I think they gave him a couple of opportunities, but he didn't race that well as their GC guy. But they didn't invest 3 years as him being their GC preferred. Whereas riders like Richie Porte seemed, in my opinion, have had an abundance of opportunities to prove their GC credentials. And Richie Porte has not been on the level of Mikel Landa the last few years. And yet Porte seems to have consistently been a GC rider. Even in this year's Tour de France for Trek Segafredo, he was their GC guy and really nothing happened. But maybe that is the problem with Landa. You can't trust a guy who loses 4 minutes in the TT the day before this stage, who seems to have off days but then be a world beater the other day. I would hope that Bahrain Merida target the Giro with him as Yuri Trofimov catches up with the group, and this is a great move from Trofimov. If you catch a group, Phil Gill did this in the Giro this year as well, in 2015. When you catch a group before they know you're there, sometimes it's good to roll the momentum, and if the GC guys are just looking at each other, you could sneak a stage win. Unfortunately, in this last K, it really pitches up, and Astana had been drilling it on the front all day. And for them to put no time into Contador and not win this stage would have been a complete disaster for them. I think the stories of Mikel Landa and Nairo Quintana, their career trajectories, and then comparing those career trajectories to maybe some of the Anglo GC guys like Wiggins, Thomas, Froome, it shows how sometimes you can't plot a linear trajectory of people's career. You can't say, oh well, Mikel Landa, he got third on GC in Giro d'Italia 2015, looked fantastic. So, and at 25, that means that when he's 30, he's going to be winning multiple Grand Tour stages and being on Grand Tour podiums. Maybe 25, 26 was his peak. Maybe some riders peak at 25, 26, and some riders like Chris Horner peak at 41 years old when he won the Vuelta. And Cadel Evans had a really extended, not really a peak, it was just like a long, consistent period of being a GC guy where his level stayed really high, and that enabled him to get unlucky some years and lose by a really close margin in Tour de France and come second, and then other years come first. So I really don't know what's going to happen with Mikel Landa at Bahrain. I suspect, I would honestly, I'd be surprised if he was on a podium of a Grand Tour next year. I'd more expect Quintana to come through with a really strong one year, 18 months. I think Landa, he has stages like this stage and stage 15 where he looks unbelievably good and no one can stick with him. When he gets in the drops up a 12% pinch, Landissima looks amazing. But then there's other days where he almost gets dropped when the GC group is just setting tempo. He's sort of off and on rider. But unfortunately for him, he eventually, I think during his peak years, he's gone to Sky where he wasn't the preferred rider. If it comes down to a choice between him, Froome and Thomas, there's only going to be one winner. And then he went to Movistar, who had many of the same issues as Astana in this race, where they had Quintana and Valverde come second and third in the Tour de France, when maybe it would have been better to leverage those two better to try and vault one of them into GC. So Contador, he was the best rider in the Giro 2015, but he certainly didn't have the best team, and Astana had the best team. And yes, Landa got this win on stage 15, and Fabio Aru got the stage win in stage 21, but they could have had more, and I think Contador has to thank Landa against Aru dynamics internally with that team for part of the reason why he won. As always guys, if you like this video, make sure you like the video down below, helps a lot. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I have a video idea and I'm going to pin the comment down below, so like it if you want me to make this video. It's the Col de Perasud climbing record, which is still held by Alexander Vinokourov and Iban Mayo, although Vinokourov was doing the work. I think in the 2003 Tour de France, when he dropped the Ulrich Armstrong group. So if you want me to analyse that stage, up to the climb up to Perasud, make sure you like that comment. Ciao.